on my first step ever, my viewers, my listeners. Today we have an amazing person because he dealt with the crisis that most of us deal with, but how he came out of it is the key to his success. And he's here to share his secrets or his plans, that how actionable steps that he took that helped him go past those challenges. His inspiring journey started when he was a child and he understood that he's having a linear sequential learning disability. Now, I think we'll get into that, to becoming a consultant to self-made multi-millionaires. That is a great, great achievement. And this ability did not stop him from craving his way to success. A former Australian champion athlete and the founder and CEO of Tolson Institute, please join me in welcoming
Daniel Tolson.
Amazing.
Wow, what a beautiful introduction. And, those first steps, Ashani, is so hard. They say it takes 95% of your mental energy just to begin. So anybody who's taken the first step, congratulations. It only takes 5% of your energy to maintain that momentum. So well done.
Wow. And I think that clearly describes why taking the first step is so difficult and why most of us just remain in the procrastination zone. I'm so excited to have you here, Daniel, and I'm very eager to know about your journey. And I'm sure our listeners, our viewers, our friends who are listening to us today are curious right now and will gain a lot out of it. So to begin with, let us go back into your childhood time. You discovered something about yourself, which I would like you to share with us. What was your first feeling, like if you remember what you felt when you got to know about it, and how did people around you react?
Well, I remember that my teachers used to say to me in my report cards from maybe first grade, Daniel doesn't try hard enough. If Daniel just tried a little bit harder, he'd be a good student. And I'd go from class to class, from teacher to teacher, and they would say the same thing. Daniel just doesn't try hard enough. And if he tried hard enough, then he would be doing fine. And that used to really make me angry. And I couldn't express those emotions at a younger age. I knew I was working hard. I was a good student. I'd get to class early. I'd have my books with me. I'd be wide-eyed watching the teacher. And I was putting effort in the classroom and at home. However, what nobody noticed was an invisible blockage, which was a linear sequential learning disability. And so when I was processing information, it was getting jumbled up in my mind. And so at age 11, I actually collapsed because I'd had these constant migraine headaches. And the migraine headaches were coming from the platelets in my cranium that were pushing down on the brain. This was creating a disconnect between left and right hemispheres. So I was living in this pain. That was causing problems where I couldn't see. Albeit I had 20/20 vision, the information wasn't processing. Also, I was tone deaf and I couldn't hear the difference between tones. So all of this challenge was happening inside. Nobody could see it. My spine was twisted. My hips were out of alignment. My knees would collapse when I was running. And all these things just made me come to a standstill at age 11. And that's when I collapsed and people started to take notice. I'd get bleeding noses. My chest would tighten up. I couldn't breathe. I ended up having collapsed bronchioles. And so all of these things made me come to a standstill at age 11. And I think that's when people thought, maybe he is trying hard, but maybe there's something wrong with him. So my perception was, maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I'm dumb. And I think other people's perception was, I think he's stupid. I think he must be dumb. Stay away from him. And the teachers ended up putting me in a class called the Space Lab. And I thought that was a good place because Space Lab, to me, I thought I was going to be an astronaut. But the Space Lab was for the kids who were out of this bloody planet. They didn't know what to do with them.
Fancy name.
Very fancy. So that was what happened at age 11.
Yeah, I'm just taking some time to process this information because it's really challenging, the phase that you have gone through. And I'm not sure, how you must have processed this information. It must have taken some time, and how you came out of it. But I would also like to mention this to our listeners right now. I think at that age, when you're growing up, you also have different challenges that you go through. I'm sure you know what you must have gone through, like how Daniel is just sharing his was a very severe challenge that he had to face. But a lot of us have some sort of emotional challenges, some incidents, some experiences hold us back. So what we are trying to help each one of you over here through Daniel's story. Thank you so much again, Daniel. How to go past those difficult times and how to build an identity of yourself. Now, Daniel, you've just discussed that, what was the challenge in your life. And I think that was very difficult. And then you were put in the space lab, the fancy place.
And all the other things. I'll tell you some more places they put me.
Oh, I dread what's coming our way.
Well, after that, I was in remedial therapy for 5 years. So that was just the beginning. And so I would sit in the classroom, I could see what was on the board, but when I looked at the board and wrote down in my books, nothing matched. The words were jumbled up, but they were in the wrong order and sequence, and then when I would read them out, nothing would make sense. So my other classmates would laugh at me. Now, I thought they thought I was funny, but then I realized they laughing at because of my stupidity at that stage. So for 5 years, I went into remedial therapy, and I started to work with different doctors, different physicians, and they really had to work on my body. So they had to get my spine straight. They had to get my neck straight. And then I had cranial massage to realign the platelets and get them up off the left and right hemispheres. And that was incredibly painful. I remember then I was also going to a special eye doctor, and this was one of the rooms they put me in. They would sit me in a room, I'd sit on a stool, and from the ceiling they'd bring down a tennis ball. And they'd hit the tennis ball, and I'd have to watch it move around the room. And all I was allowed to do was move my eyes left and right, up and down. And that's what I'd do. And then there was another room. I used to go down to a place called Strathfield, just outside of the centre of Sydney. And there'd be all these kids, maybe 5 and 6 years of age. And here am I, 11 and 12, in the same room, learning the same things as them. So I'd have to take this crayon. And I think this was the most embarrassing one. And they wanted to sync the hemispheres of my mind, so hemi-syncing. And I'd get a crayon and I'd have to draw a figure 8. And all I was allowed to do was draw a figure 8. 12-year-old boy drawing a figure 8. And I'd do it with my right hand, and I'd do it a couple of hundred times, and then I'd do it in my left hand a couple of hundred times. And I just had to keep doing that until I could get the left and the right brain communicating correctly. And so I knew I was doing that. I knew there was something different about me, but the thought that if somebody else knew what I was doing in these rooms, that would have been embarrassing. So I was lucky that it was out of town. But when I was back in our hometown, I'd have to go to special tutoring classes, nonstop, maths, English, music lessons. But I was tone deaf. I was having music lessons and I couldn't even hear the musical notes. So those are some of the things that I had just to develop over years. I remember I had to learn how to swim to develop that lung capacity. And I just played catch up for about 5 years.
Wow. So I see that you have spent your, growing up days very differently, even academically, as compared to your counterparts at that point in time. As much as it looks, physically draining, it sounds so physically draining on you. I'm sure it was many folds emotionally draining and mentally draining for you. So Daniel, over here, when you were treated differently from people of your age and you grew up very differently, did you ever have that identity crisis moment in your life? And if yes, what were your thoughts and how did you come out of it?
Well, for me, going through school, it was always a comparison, and that was the danger. My teachers would compare me to the other students. And as you mentioned here, academically, it was a challenge for me. I was intelligent. I was smart. But they just couldn't measure that in the school system.
Right.
So, yes, I couldn't do maths. Yes, I couldn't do English. Yes, I was bad at geography. Yes, I was bad at language. All the things that they score you on, I was bad at. But when it came to doing other things, they couldn't measure that ability. They couldn't measure my social skills. I was very good at getting along with other people, but they didn't measure that. I was good athletically, but they wouldn't measure and reward that. So what happened to me was I would begin to compare myself to others. And I remember many times I'd say to myself, I just want to be like the other kids. I just want to be like the other students. I just want to get a good grade. I just want to get a bit of acknowledgement. And it was that constant comparison. And as I reflect on it now, as you compare yourself to others, eventually you end up looking down on yourself. You look down
Absolutely.
on yourself and you look up to everybody else, and you don't see your own value anymore as you go through that academic environment. And so that probably happened till I was around about 16 or 17, and then I got sick again. So just after I had 5 years of remedial therapy, I contracted Epstein-Barr virus and chronic fatigue, and then I got teenage chickenpox. So I was quite sick, and eventually I had to drop out of school altogether. And I remember just before I dropped out of school, I was 17 and I had a really nice first car. I'd worked really hard. I'd saved my money.
Woohoo.
And I bought an old car, a 1971 Datsun 1600. And it was $5,000. Now, other people in my school were driving cars worth $30,000, but mine was $5,000 and I liked it. And I remember one day I went to a party and one guy in my year, he was so jealous of my car that he took a beer and he poured beer all over my new paint job on my 1971 Datsun 1600. And at that stage, I looked around and went, you know what? I actually don't want to be like these people. These people, now that I'm 17 and I can see myself differently, I don't want to be like them. I want to be an individual. So for the many years that I compared myself, just as I left school, I looked around and said, I don't want to be anything like these people. Thank God I grew up differently. I've just got to now figure out how I use this uniqueness that I've got. So yes, looking down, comparing myself to others.
You know what I can gather from your story so far is that because you had a very different way of growing up, and I think you always had that constant need of, I want to achieve this, I want to do my best, and I want to get on top of everything that I'm doing because people treat me differently, or maybe I'm different. So I think you always had that mindset, life is not that simple. You're not taking life for granted. It's for what I understand. And that's why you gave your best shot in everything that you did. And your learning was so different, but it definitely shaped you the way you are today. And you're doing so well from being a student who is, going through such difficult time, yet you're trying to, get on top of everything that a person needs while growing up. So along with that, now that, no one can say that you're the same person who is co-leading a team of 17,000 cabin crew people, and you're helping 15,000 businesses globally to lead their way ahead. This is that is such a great story, I would say. So I would like to come to the part where, if you can describe from there on, when you realize this is who I am, this is what I want to be, what were the 3 experiences that you can maybe tell us that helped you become what you are today, or that helped you have this mindset, this is my life goal, or this is the path, now I'm going to go ahead from here, this way?
Beautiful question. Well, the 3 experiences, the first thing that happened when I left school, I ended up having 2 consecutive knee reconstructions year after year. So I was still in and out of hospital till age 19. And just after I got out of hospital for the second time, I went a little bit wild. I went a little bit crazy. And my uncle, he said to me, Danny boy, you're off the tracks. He said, you're out of control. You're reckless. He said, you got to make something of your life. And my uncle, really admire him. He said, look, come and work with me in real estate. He said, real estate's a great place for people who've got no education. Now, that was a compliment. He said, it's the last place you can work and people aren't going to judge you on your certificate. He said, they're going to judge you on your people skills. He said, you've got wit, you've got charisma, you've got charm, you've got courage. And he said, in this industry, you will get rewarded for that. So he took me under his wing, and on day 1 of working with him, he gave me a book. And it was from a gentleman by the name of Brian Tracy. This is a really important name to remember, Brian Tracy. And he gave me a book called Maximum Achievement. And inside the book, he wrote a message to me and said, to Danny boy, this is your blueprint of success. Love, Uncle John. And he gave me that. And he said, if you apply everything in here, he said, you'll make a success out of your life. He said, you will be a story of success. And I read that book and I studied that book. And within 12 months, I was one of the top 10 sales creators in Australia in real estate.
Wow.
No education, just charisma, charm, and courage. I then applied those skills, and within 6 months, I had purchased my first real estate investment property. So I was 19 and a half, and I was buying my first property. My teachers at school were making less money than me, and they were telling me I was stupid. Then I was thinking, I don't think I'm stupid. If I'm earning 3 and 4 times the money as they are, I'm buying my first house at age 19 and a half. And then I kept applying these ideas, and by age 21, I was buying my second real estate investment property. And I didn't have a high school education. I didn't go to university. And so then I started to realize it was more about mind power. Where I put my mind, where I put my focus, I could attract things. So that was the first experience. The second experience was I lost my business in 2007. And at that stage, I lost my job. I lost my income stream. And I was living in the Middle East, in Dubai in 2007. I had to come home. I had to come back to Australia. But in 2008, everybody wanted certificates. You couldn't get a job if you didn't have a certificate. So this was the lowest point in my life, where the only job I could get was being a construction labourer, having a shovel, throwing a hammer, and controlling traffic. I don't know if you've seen these lollipop men on the side of the road. Stop slow, stop slow.
I have.
I said, is this what God put me on this planet to do, to control traffic? I said, I don't believe this. I'm destined for greatness, but this is not greatness. And if my life is going to be like this forever, then we're going to have big problems, because this is not what I came here for. And so I looked at the sky that day, and I think when we talk to God, we look to the sky and I say, what am I doing down here? And I was driving home that day, and I drove home over the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and I saw this big building and it said Emirates. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to go back to Dubai. I liked Dubai. I felt at home in Dubai. I'm going to go work with Emirates. And within 2 weeks, I was at a job interview. 6 weeks later, I'm living in Dubai. And then a couple of years later, I'm co-leading a team of 17,000 cabin crew. When we think things are just getting good, oftentimes things go bad. And in 2010, my wife was involved in an aircraft accident. And I got a phone call at 4:00 in the morning. And it sounded like this: Daniel, this is the duty controller. This is not a peer support call. And I said, well, what is it? They said there's been an accident and it's your fiance. So 2010 to 2012, my wife and I had just rehabilitating. She went through 3 years of surgeries, 3 major knee reconstructions. And then at the end of it, she lost her job. We almost lost our baby because of miscarriage, coming close 3 times. And then at the peak of that experience, when I was co-leading a team of 17,000 people, I had to resign from my job because I wouldn't have been able to see the birth of my daughter. So this was the second turning point. Now, the third turning point, which was a really big one, and remember I mentioned before I got a book, and it was from an author by the name of Brian Tracy. Well, in 2016, I met the gentleman, his team, and I started a business with that man who I had been reading his book non-stop since age 19. And I ended up having a business of his. And then I traveled around the world teaching those things that I had been learning in that book since age 19. And I met him and I started to travel the world. Within 1 year of working with him, I was recognized as the rookie business coach globally. And in that 1 year, I had acquired 1,300 new people into my business. Now, this man has personally trained more than 5 million people. He's written 72 books. He has introduced 2 sitting presidents of the United States of America. He's a big deal.
Wow.
And one day he got sick and he asked me to come and speak on his behalf. And so I've even spoken on behalf of my mentor in front of 250 business people in San Diego, California. Now, they could have chosen anybody from around the world, but they chose me. And so they were the 3 big turning points for me. And with every bit of success, there was a failure. Every time I got a little bit more success, there was another failure. But what I've learned is that failure is also a prerequisite of success. And if you fail a lot, it often means that you're going to be a big success. And I'm starting to see that in my life and the lives of the people that I teach.
Just by listening to what all you have been through, the phases of your life, you can definitely see really high ups and really, really low lowdowns. We can see that over here. Often we complain about a lot of difficult situations that we go through. Sometimes if I'm just talking to a youth, what I hear them saying, this is how my parents treated me. This is what happened to me while I was growing up. This is how my friend treated me. And, this is how people made me feel, which I can definitely say that, yes, your problems are validated and we understand that it is a big thing and it leaves an impression. But from your story, I can definitely say that once you understand that something has gone wrong or something is not right, and you have to accept the situation and then find a way out of it. So stopping is no option. And Daniel, I really don't know what to say regarding the situation that you were put into with your fiance, and I'm really glad that everything is good now. But looking at the difficult situations that you were in, I believe that you are giving us a lot of us a lot of hope today, that we can also go past our difficulties at whatever stage we are right now. So thank you so much. And coming to this final question today is, how did you, take your first step towards your business? I think we have already discussed that in a lot of details, but if there's one thing that you would like to mention that took you through your 95% for the very first time.
Desire. The word is desire, and you've got to have a burning desire for what you want. You've got to be able to bleed for what you want. And what I've learned in my life is that the biggest problem on the planet today, it's not a shortage of money. It's not a shortage of opportunity. It's a shortage of desire. And if you want something bad enough and you're willing to bleed for it, if you're willing to do whatever it takes, you will get it. It's just a matter of time. And it starts with desire. Desire doesn't cost you anything. It's yours. It's your birthright. And you can have as much of it as you want.
That makes a lot of sense. I think because a lot of time you lose out on motivation. And that's why I think I've been hearing this a lot, and I've experienced that myself, that motivation does die off at certain point in time. But having that burning desire, that why, or that, a point that pulls you forward all the time can definitely take you past your 95%. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for being on my first step ever, and especially taking us through really deep in your personal story. That takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage to do that. And definitely, I am really, really excited that I could get a chance to speak to you today. And before you leave, are you able to leave our listeners with the one book that you would like to recommend? I'm sure you have already mentioned one, but if you would like to recommend something else or the same one should read in their lifetime. And the second one is, what is the quote that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
Well, the first book that I'd recommend would be the one that my Uncle John gave me, which was Maximum Achievement by Brian Tracy. That's the most important one. Now, the quote that I'd like to leave you with is, you become what you think about most of the time. And successful people think about their goals and their future. And what happens is they start to achieve wonderful things. So you become what you think about most of the time.
I would like to tell all my listeners, thank you for tuning into my first step ever. And I believe that you have enjoyed listening to Daniel, and something inside has stirred you to think more on how you can go past your first step.